The Liberal Party of Canada continues to get more and more brazen in their attack on free speech and, frankly, their attack on our democracy. They're taking the full mask off tyrannically. They have now charged Keenan Bext, a reporter, under Section 91(1) of the Canada Elections Act for his reporting in the lead up to an election in Calgary, where he has eight sources. This is not one source. This is not two sources. This is not four sources. 8 sources that claim that Thomas Keeper, who was the Liberal candidate, was engaged in a bunch of disgusting behavior. I won't get into all the details, but on the record, he has talked about saying disgusting things about his wife, different real estate agents claiming that he was a psychopath, a bunch of stories that paint the guy in an incredibly negative light, and he wound up dropping out of the race just 3 days after the story was released. Would you really drop out of the race 3 days after the story was released if the accusations were not true? Keenan Bext, who writes for Juno News and reported on this story, has now been charged under a ridiculous speech law, another goddamn speech law in Canada, Section 91(1), which states that you can be given up to 5 years in prison if you make knowingly false accusations against a candidate in a run-up to influence an election. The fact that they are charging this man, this journalist, and going after somebody who used 8 sources in an article, the chilling effect it is going to have on Canadian journalists is shocking. This is the type of stuff you would see in Mao's China, in Stalin's USSR. This is the most anti-Canadian garbage you've ever heard. But will you hear a peep about it on CBC, CTV, any of our state-sponsored propaganda stations? I have not seen a peep in defense of their fellow journalists thus far, because this guy was criticizing a Liberal. We live in a 2-tiered police state, but we need to wake the hell up. If there is not a free press in this country, if citizens are not allowed to speak their mind, then we are no better than the autocracies that Mark Carney and the Liberals constantly criticize in China, in Russia, but that we inch closer and closer to every day. This man, Keenan Bext, was simply reporting on a story. Nothing was made up in this story. Sources are on the record in the article that he wrote. It is incredibly well sourced. It's clearly not made up when you read the article. As I noted, quotes directly related to Thomas Keeper's wife, the ways he acted, are on the record from business consultants who worked on a long-term basis with Keeper, as well as real estate agents who had worked with him on a long-term basis. The Liberal Party is now out and out going after journalists and making it clear to all Canadian media, you are not allowed to be critical of us or we are going after you. Between this Bill 91(1), which, by the way, it was actually struck down in a court in Ontario in the year 2021, but somehow the Liberals have managed to revive it. If this law, in addition to Bill C-63, the so-called Online Harms Act, which sees the creation of a digital safety commission with 10 unelected bureaucrats and an ombudsman having the ability to put Canadians under house arrest, given an ankle bracelet, and confiscate any firearm, not for anything they posted online, not for any speech, but for the belief that they may say something hateful in the future. Yes, I kid you not. Look into it. This is part of Bill C-63, the so-called Online Harms Act, as well as the expansion of hate speech to so-called fomenting detestation and vilification, which of course is incredibly difficult to define and will be abused, like in this Keenan Bext case, as well as possible lifetime imprisonment for so-called incitement to genocide. The Liberal Party of Canada is making it more and more clear they're going full-on communist and stating that you will be targeted and you will be prosecuted if you are critical of this government and their insane policies, where by every objective measure, the standard of living in Canada continues to drop further and further and further every day. We need to yell from the rooftops about this case. This man is facing 5 years in prison. 5 years in prison for reporting a factual story on a Liberal candidate running for office, and now they're trying to imprison this man. If journalists are being treated like this in Canada, can you imagine how private citizens are going to be with CBC, the state-funded propaganda machine, and their so-called visual investigations unit? I kid you not, look it up, it exists, which is now going after individual conservative right-leaning citizens and their social media channels. They've already had a bunch of channels taken down. That's right, the CBC, which receives $1.5 billion a year in taxpayers' money, they are using that money to go after private Canadian citizens who say things the government doesn't like. We are inching closer and closer to full-on communism every day in Canada, and the government wants to shut anybody up who doesn't talk, who doesn't fall in line with their insane policies, which by every objective measure is making this country worse and worse and worse. You're not allowed to say anything about immigration. You're not allowed to say anything about speech laws. You're not allowed to say anything if you're critical of the LGBT community. Mark Carney saying that we're celebrating 365 years. The message from the Liberal government is sit down and shut your mouth if you don't agree with us. The Canadian people, I know we're not going to take it. I just got approved Saturday, September 13th at noon, rally, Take Canada Back, Parliament Hill. I want to see tens of thousands of patriotic Canadians. This is yet another attack on our free speech, and it cannot go unheard by the Canadian citizenry what its government is attempting to do to them. If you're interested in supporting the cause, hit join, become a member, help mold this movement from the ground up. Take Canada Back, like, subscribe, share. If you're following on TikTok, please make sure you're following on YouTube, because I have over 12,000 followers right now, and the Canadian government is not a big fan of distance. But make sure everybody hears this story about Keenan Beck's now facing 5 years in prison. Hey, creepy Mark Carney, your Liberal cohorts, we are not letting you creeps shut us up. I will not shut up. Patriotic Canadians will not shut up. We are going to fight, and we are going to win.